Ava's voice broke over the phone like thunder cracking through a clear Texas sky, and the words that followed ripped the air right out of my lungs. Serenity, I can't keep doing this. My parents, the church elders, they've been praying nonstop, and they say what we have is against God's plan. I have to choose faith over us. I stood frozen in our little Austin apartment, the one we'd painted soft lavender together last spring. The pride flag still tucked behind the couch for safety whenever her folks dropped by unannounced. My hand gripped the phone so tight the screen creaked, but all I could manage was a whisper. Ava, please, we've talked about this 100 times. Your family doesn't get to decide who we are. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing, that shaky inhale she always did when she was fighting tears, the same sound she'd made the night we first kissed in the back of her old pickup truck after a youth group lock-in. Back then, everything felt possible. We were 23, fresh out of college, convinced our love could outrun the Bible verses her mother quoted at every Sunday dinner. But now, 3 years later, the weight of those verses had finally crushed her. It's not just them, she said finally, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I feel it too, Serenity. Every time we hold hands in public, every time I lie to my pastor about why I'm not dating a nice Christian boy.
I'm drowning.
I need time to figure out if this is really me, or if I've been running from the truth. The line went dead before I could beg her to stay. I slid down the wall until I hit the hardwood floor, the same floor we'd danced on barefoot to that old Casey Musgraves song the night she moved in. My chest ached like someone had punched straight through it. How could the woman who'd whispered, "You're my forever," while we watched fireworks over Lady Bird Lake suddenly sound like a stranger reciting scripture? I cried until my eyes burned, then cried some more. The apartment felt too big, too empty, too full of us. Her coffee mug still sat in the sink, lipstick print on the rim like a ghost. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. That first week blurred into a fog of unanswered texts and sleepless nights. I'd stare at the ceiling replaying every argument we'd ever had about faith. Ava had grown up in a strict Southern Baptist home outside San Antonio, where the pastor's word was law and being gay meant you were either confused or headed for hell. I'd always been the steady one, raised by parents who went to church on Christmas and Easter but never made it the center of our lives. Love is love, I told her 1,000 times. God wouldn't give us these feelings if they were wrong. She'd nod, kiss me, and for a while it was enough. But the calls from her mother grew louder, the prayer circles at church tighter, until one day she just broke. By the second week I was a mess. I called in sick to my job at the community center, where I helped run after-school programs for queer kids. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the one supposed to have it all figured out, falling apart because the woman I loved chose her family's God over me. Friends texted, offering coffee or wine or a shoulder, but I couldn't face anyone. Instead I drove out to the hill country, parked on a dirt road, and screamed until my throat was raw. The wind carried my voice away like it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. It was on the 23rd day, yes I was counting, that I finally left the apartment. The walls had started closing in and I needed air. I ended up at a small LGBTQ support group, meeting in a nondescript community hall downtown. I almost turned around at the door. The last thing I wanted was to sit in a circle and talk about feelings. But the woman at the front desk smiled like she understood, and something in me cracked open just enough to step inside. That's where I met Riley. She was sitting in the back row, legs crossed, wearing a faded UT Austin hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. Her dark curls were pulled into a messy bun, and when she laughed at something the facilitator said, the sound cut through the fog in my chest like sunlight. I didn't plan to talk that night. I sat there silent while others shared their stories of coming out, of family rejection, of finding love again. Then Riley raised her hand. I'm Riley, she said, voice steady and warm. Lost my girlfriend 6 months ago when her parents threatened to cut her off financially. She chose them. It still hurts, but I'm learning that my worth isn't tied to someone else's approval. Our eyes met across the circle, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. After the meeting she lingered by the coffee station. You looked like you needed a friend, she said simply, handing me a styrofoam cup. We talked for an hour in the parking lot under the buzzing streetlights. She was a graphic designer, 29, out and proud since high school. No shame, no hiding. Listening to her made my own pain feel a little less like a life sentence. When she asked for my number, I gave it without thinking twice. The next few days we texted constantly. Nothing heavy at first, just memes, bad jokes about Texas heat, recommendations for the best tacos in Austin. Felt easy. Too easy. Part of me kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Riley to suddenly remember some Bible verse or family obligation that would send her running. But she never did. She was solid in a way Ava had never been allowed to be. Still, guilt gnawed at me every night. I'd lie in bed staring at the empty side where Ava used to sleep, and wonder if I was betraying her by even smiling at someone new. Was I moving on too fast? Was I proving her family right by refusing to wait? The questions circled like vultures. I didn't have answers. All I knew was that for the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel like I was drowning. By the end of the first month, Riley and I were spending most evenings together. She'd come over after work with takeout from our favorite food truck, and we'd sit on the tiny balcony watching the city lights flicker on. She never pushed, never asked about Ava unless I brought her up. That patience felt like a lifeline. One night, after we'd finished a ridiculous rom-com, I finally told her everything. The words spilled out in a rush: how Ava and I had met at a college Bible study of all places, how we'd kept our relationship secret for months, how her mother's weekly sermons on the gay agenda had slowly chipped away at her until there was nothing left of us. Riley listened without interrupting, her hand resting lightly on my knee. When I finished, she said quietly, "That sounds like hell, Serenity. But you know it wasn't your job to save her from her own beliefs, right?" I wanted to argue, to say that love was supposed to conquer everything. Instead, I just nodded because deep down I knew she was right. The ache in my chest hadn't vanished, but it had started to feel more like a bruise than an open wound. We started dating officially 2 weeks later. Nothing flashy. Just a picnic at Zilker Park where she brought my favorite sparkling water, and I brought the blanket we'd used on our first unofficial date. Kissing her felt different than kissing Ava. Not better or worse, just free. There was no glancing over our shoulders, no lowering our voices when we said, "I love you." Riley held my hand in public like it was the most natural thing in the world, and every time she did, a little piece of the shame I'd absorbed from Ava's family loosened its grip. But the guilt didn't disappear completely. I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos of Ava and me, wondering if she was okay. Had she started dating a man yet? Was she sitting in church every Sunday feeling like she'd won or like she'd lost everything? I hated that I still cared. Riley noticed the distance on those nights and would pull me close. "You're allowed to grieve her," she'd whisper. "Just don't let her ghost keep you from living." The real test came when my own family got involved. My parents had always been quietly supportive, but even they had questions. We met for brunch at a cafe near the Capitol building one Saturday. Mom stirred her coffee too long before speaking. "Honey, we love you. We just worry." Ava seemed so sure about her faith. "Are you sure jumping into something new is healthy?" Dad nodded along, his face lined with concern. "We don't want you getting hurt again." I felt the old defensiveness rise. "This isn't about replacing Ava," I said, voice tighter than I intended. "It's about choosing me for once. Riley doesn't make me feel like I'm broken for loving women." The conversation didn't turn into a fight, but it left me rattled. On the drive home, Riley didn't say much, just held my hand while I processed. That night we talked for hours about faith and identity. Riley had grown up in a progressive household where church was optional and love was celebrated no matter the gender. She believed in God, she said, but not the version that required her to hate herself. "I think the Bible's been twisted by people who are scared of anything they don't understand," she told me. "But I also get why Ava's scared. Changing your whole worldview isn't easy." Her words stuck with me. For the first time I saw Ava not as the villain but as someone trapped between two impossible choices. That didn't make the pain go away, but it made it more human. Our relationship deepened through the fall. We hiked the Greenbelt on weekends, cooked terrible experiments in my kitchen, and slowly started talking about a future. One crisp October evening, Riley turned to me on the couch and said, "I want to build something real with you, Serenity. No hiding. No apologies." I kissed her then, long and slow, and for the first time since Ava left, I believed it was possible. But life has a way of testing you. 2 weeks later, I ran into Ava's younger sister at the grocery store. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Serenity?" We heard you were seeing someone new. The way she said it made my stomach drop. Word had spread through their tight-knit church community. I mumbled something polite and escaped to the parking lot, heart pounding. That night I told Riley everything. She listened, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you think Ava knows? I didn't have an answer. But the thought of her hearing about us twisted something deep inside me. Part of me wanted her to know I'd survived. Another part, the part that still loved the girl she'd been, hoped she was finding her own peace. The holidays hit like a freight train. Christmas lights went up all over Austin, but my apartment stayed dim. Riley invited me to her family's gathering, a loud, chaotic affair full of aunts who hugged too hard and cousins who asked zero questions about my sexuality. It felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. Her mom pulled me aside after dinner and said simply, "We're glad you're here, honey. Riley lights up around you." I almost cried in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Ava's silence had turned into rumors. A mutual friend let slip that she'd started attending extra Bible studies and was seeking counsel about same-sex attraction. The news shouldn't have hurt after 3 months, but it did. I found myself driving past her parents' house one rainy afternoon, the same brick ranch where we'd once snuck kisses in the backyard. Lights glowed warm inside. I wondered if she was sitting at the dinner table right now, smiling like nothing had changed. The thought made me pull over and grip the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Riley found me like that when I got home. She didn't judge. Instead, she made hot chocolate and listened while I spilled every ugly feeling. "You don't have to be over her to love me," she said softly. "Just don't let her live rent-free in your head forever." We ended up talking late into the night about what faith really meant. Riley pulled up verses on her phone, ones about love and grace that her own church emphasized. "I believe God wants us happy," she said, "not miserable and pretending." Her certainty was magnetic. For the first time I started to believe my love wasn't a sin. It was just love. By New Year's we were talking marriage. Not in a big dramatic way, just quiet conversations on the couch about rings and venues and whether we'd want kids someday. Riley wanted a small ceremony by the lake. I wanted something that felt like us. The idea terrified and thrilled me at the same time. Was I rushing? Was I trying to prove something to Ava? The questions kept me awake, but every morning Riley's good morning text reminded me I was choosing happiness now. Then the invitation came. Not to me directly. Ava's sister posted it on social media for the whole church circle to see. Ava was getting baptized again. A fresh start, the caption read. A rededication to purity. The photo showed her in a white robe, smiling at the camera with that same gentle curve of lips I'd kissed 1,000 times. My stomach turned. Riley saw the post over my shoulder and went very still. "You okay?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. That weekend we drove out to the hill country to clear our heads. We hiked up Enchanted Rock and sat at the top watching the sunset paint the sky orange. Riley took my hand. "I want to marry you, Serenity. Not to prove anything. Just because I can't imagine my life without you." The words hung in the cold air between us. I looked at her, really looked, and saw a future that didn't require me to shrink myself. "Yes," I whispered. "Let's do it." Planning started immediately. I threw myself into it with a fierceness that surprised even me. Venues, flowers, catering. I organized every detail like it was a mission. Riley teased me about becoming a wedding planner overnight, but she loved it. We chose a beautiful spot outside Austin with oak trees and a view of the hills. No church. No crosses. Just us, our friends, and the sky. The guest list was small. My family, Riley's family, a handful of close friends from the support group. I hesitated over Ava's name for a long time. In the end, I didn't send her one. Some doors were better left closed. Or so I told myself. Spring arrived with wildflowers carpeting the Texas countryside, and our wedding date crept closer. I spent every spare minute finalizing details, confirming the string quartet, tasting cakes, choosing invitations with simple wildflower borders. Organizing the wedding became my way of reclaiming the future I'd almost lost. Riley watched me with quiet pride, helping where she could but mostly letting me lead. "This is your healing," she said one night as we addressed envelopes. "I'm just lucky to be part of it." Word traveled faster than I expected in our interconnected circles. One afternoon my phone buzzed with a text from an old college friend. Heard you're getting married. Congrats. Ava saw the save the date on Instagram. She's processing. My heart stuttered. I hadn't posted anything public, but Riley's cousin had tagged us in a group photo. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Riley found me on the balcony later, staring at the city skyline. She knows, I said flatly. Riley wrapped her arms around me from behind. And that's okay. You deserve this day, Serenity. No matter who knows. The first direct contact came 2 weeks before the wedding. Ava's number flashed on my screen at midnight. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was raw. Serenity. I saw. You're really doing this. There was no anger. Just a quiet disbelief that cut deeper than shouting ever could. I sat on the edge of the bed, Riley sleeping peacefully beside me. Yeah, Ava. I am. Riley makes me happy in a way I didn't know was possible after you left. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, my family thinks I'm weak for even calling. But I needed to hear your voice. To know you're okay. We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about the baptism, the counseling sessions, the way her mother cried tears of joy at her return to the fold. I told her about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep and the mornings Riley had helped me stand up again. Neither of us apologized. Neither of us could. When we hung up, I cried quietly into Riley's shoulder. She held me without asking questions. The next morning she said simply, whatever you need, I'm here. The debate started then. Not fights. Real painful conversations that left us both exhausted. Riley and I sat up late one night talking about scripture. She pulled out her study Bible and showed me passages about love that contradicted the ones Ava's church loved to quote. I don't think God is as small as they make him out to be, she said. I countered with memories of Ava's tearful prayers, wondering aloud if maybe I was the one running from truth. Riley never got defensive. She just listened and reminded me that my happiness wasn't a theological debate. It was my life. My parents had their own concerns. Mom called the week before the rehearsal dinner. We support you, honey. We really do. But have you thought about what this means for Ava's family? They're hurting too. I wanted to snap that they'd hurt me first, but the words died in my throat. Instead I said, I can't live my life trying to fix their pain, Mom. I tried that once. It almost broke me. She didn't argue. She just told me she loved me and that they'd be there with bells on. The rehearsal dinner was small and perfect. Laughter echoed under the string lights as Riley's dad told embarrassing stories, and my brother gave a toast that had everyone tearing up. For a few hours the weight of everything lifted. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Ava. I hope you're happy, Serenity. I really do. But part of me will always wonder what if. I didn't reply. Some questions didn't need answers anymore. The week before the wedding felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Every detail was set, the flowers ordered, the vows written, the rings engraved with our initials inside a tiny heart. I woke up each morning with a mix of excitement and terror that this was really happening. Riley noticed and pulled me aside one evening after we finished packing favors. Cold feet? She asked gently. I shook my head. Not about you. About everything else. She understood. We spent the night talking through every fear I had. About Ava, about faith, about whether choosing myself meant hurting someone I'd once loved more than life. The confrontation came 3 days before the ceremony. I was at the venue doing a final walkthrough when Ava's car pulled into the gravel lot. She stepped out in jeans and a simple blouse, looking thinner than I remembered. My heart slammed against my ribs. She walked straight up to me, eyes red-rimmed. I had to see it for myself, she said. Had to see if this was real. We stood under the oak trees where Riley and I would say our vows, the air thick with the scent of impending rain. What followed wasn't a screaming match. It was worse. We sat on a bench and talked for 2 hours. She told me how her church had wrapped her in prayer and support after our breakup, how she dated a boy from youth group for 3 weeks before realizing she couldn't fake it, how her mother still cried at night thinking she'd failed as a parent. They love me, Serenity. They just love their version of God more. I told her about the nights I'd questioned everything, about how Riley had never once made me feel dirty for who I was. I still love you in a way, I admitted, the words tasting like ash. But I love me more now. I have to. Ava cried then, quiet tears that tracked down her cheeks. I don't know who's right anymore, she whispered. The pastor says one thing. My heart says another. And seeing you here, it hurts, but it also makes me wonder if I gave up too soon. I didn't have answers for her. I could only take her hand for a moment and say, whatever you choose, I hope you find peace. I really do. She left without promising anything. That night I told Riley everything. She held me while I shook, then said the wisest thing I'd heard in months. You both did what you thought was right at the time. Now you both get to live with it. The arguments continued in my head long after Ava drove away. Was I selfish for moving on? Was she brave for staying true to her beliefs? The lines blurred until I couldn't tell where love ended and obligation began. Riley reminded me daily that our wedding wasn't about Ava. It was about us. But I still felt the weight of every choice that had led us here. My family arrived the day before the wedding. Dad hugged me extra tight and whispered, proud of you, kiddo, for fighting for what you want. Mom's eyes were misty when she saw Riley in her rehearsal dress. For the first time in years, I felt completely seen. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. The kind of Texas spring day that makes everything feel possible. I stood in the small bridal suite overlooking the hills, my simple white dress rustling as Riley adjusted my veil. She looked beautiful in her tailored suit, curls loose around her shoulders, eyes shining with the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. Ready? She asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. As I'll ever be. Guests filled the wooden chairs under the oak canopy. Soft music played as my father walked me down the aisle. I scanned the crowd out of habit, half expecting to see Ava's face. She wasn't there. Relief and a strange sadness mixed in my chest. Then I looked at Riley waiting for me, and everything else faded. We said our vows under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. My voice didn't shake when I promised to love her through every doubt and every joy. When the officiant pronounced us married, the cheers that rose up felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The reception was everything we dreamed. Laughter, dancing, toasts that had everyone crying and clapping. Riley spun me around the floor to our song, and for those hours the world was perfect. But as the sun dipped low, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the tent. Ava. She stood alone in a simple dress, hands clasped tight. Our eyes met across the crowd. She gave a small, sad smile and mouthed, congratulations. I excused myself from Riley and walked over. We stepped outside where the stars were just starting to show. I had to come, she said quietly. Not to stop anything. Just to see you happy. To say goodbye for real. Tears stung my eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, Ava. But I couldn't keep waiting for you to choose me. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I know. And I couldn't choose you over everything I was taught. Maybe neither of us was completely wrong. Or completely right. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of 3 years settling between us like dust after a storm. Take care of yourself, I said finally. She touched my arm once gently, then turned and walked back to her car. I watched her taillights disappear down the road and felt something inside me finally release. Riley found me a few minutes later. She didn't ask questions, just pulled me into a dance under the string lights. Later that night, as we lay in our hotel room with the windows open to the cool air, I told her everything. She kissed my forehead and said, you did the hard thing. You chose you. And I get to spend the rest of my life loving the woman who did that. In the quiet hours after, I thought about all the people who'd been part of this messy journey. Ava wrestling with faith and family. Her parents convinced they were protecting their daughter. My own family learning to support without understanding every piece. Riley steady and sure in her own truth. None of us had all the answers. We'd all caused pain and carried scars. But we'd also loved as best we knew how. The next morning, watching Riley sleep peacefully beside me, I understood something deep in my bones. Healing doesn't come from winning arguments or changing minds. It comes from standing in your truth, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. I had lost Ava. She had lost me. But we'd both gained something harder to name. Responsibility for our own lives. True or false? Family religious traditions should always come before personal love and identity?